All of you out there, going through a career transition, it's time to stop thinking about, and you just do it. Work hard, you put it into practice, and then what happens? You either fall on your face, you crush it, or you fall somewhere in between. Getting out of your comfort zone, that is where the learning happens.
Today's guest is Damon Lembi, the CEO of Learnit, a corporate training company that helped over 1.9 million people level up their skills. But Damon's story is anything but ordinary. From Division 1 baseball player to starting as a receptionist at his family's business and eventually becoming its CEO. Damon has lived a journey full of discipline, adaptability, and growth. His best-selling book, The Learnit Leader, champions a simple but powerful idea. Curiosity and continuous learning are the keys to leadership and success. In this episode, we dive into Damon's playbook for overcoming imposter syndrome, building a Learnit mindset, and turning setbacks into comebacks. If you ever struggled with self-doubt or wanted to know how to thrive in a world that is changing constantly, you are in for a treat. Let's get into it. What is that practice you have to put in place so you can continue learning?
Everybody learns differently. So you got to find what works for you, and then you need to be intentional and consistent.
What are the key skills somebody has to possess in order to succeed in entrepreneurship?
I'd say perseverance, resilience, curiosity, courage. And then the last one, and this is very, very important, you have to be able to...
Hey, Damon. Great to have you on my podcast. How are you today?
I'm great, Annie. Thanks for having me here. It's great to see you.
Perfect. Well, let's start with a little bit of your backstory. Who is Damon Lembi?
So I'm Damon Lembi, and I was born and raised in the San Francisco Bay Area. I'm out in a town called Sausalito. And for me, growing up, it was all about playing sports. I was big in baseball, basketball, and football. And all my friends were sports fans. All their parents were very supportive. And then Annie, by the time I was a sophomore in high school, I was thinking to myself, if I want to play sports in college or professionally, what's my best option? And so I figured it was baseball was my ticket to play after high school. And so I worked really hard in baseball. And I was fortunate enough, my senior year, I was a high school All-American. And at that point, I had my first big decision to make in my life. I got drafted by the Atlanta Braves, Major League Baseball team. And I had a choice at 17. Do I go to college or do I start a career in professional baseball? And so that was my first, I don't know if you want me to keep going from there. I can't tell you what happened, but
yeah.
So
don't stop here. Yeah, of course.
Tell
us what
here.
happened.
So what was great about my parents, great parents, Walt and Linda Lembi, they said, hey, you know what? This is your life. We're here to support you in whatever direction you want to go. And so I thought about it, and I ended up taking a full ride to Pepperdine University on a baseball scholarship. And it was really like my first big lesson in leadership. And the reason why I chose to go to Pepperdine was our coach at the time. His name is Andy Lopez, and he's now a Hall of Fame baseball coach. He had this really clear moonshot goal. It's like, we're going to win the College World Series in under 2 years, and we're going to do so with a strong pitching and a solid team of hitting. And you could be a big part of that, Damon. Now, Pepperdine had never won the College World Series before, and they're only a 2,500 person school. And so it kind of like, people were like, well, I don't know if that's even possible for a small school like that to be able to win when you go up against colleges like University of Miami or Arizona State, all these massive colleges who are baseball powerhouses. So I get to Pepperdine, and it was really the first time I struggled with imposter syndrome. I was always used to being, one of the best, if not the best, on the field. And I got there and everybody was as good as me, a lot of times better. And so with that, I really struggled. I was afraid. I just didn't even want to go onto the field. And it was a big challenge.
Yeah, but at the same time, being with other people who are better than you, that's actually quite good because they pull you forward, right? Instead of being the best in the room, and then become complacent. So from that perspective, it was fine. I know it didn't feel great, but
That's a great part. And I think this is important, for your listeners, especially if you're parents. I always played in the higher leagues. So when I was 6, I played with 8-year-olds. When I was 8, I played with 10-year-olds. When I was in high school, when I was a freshman, I played on the varsity team. So I always played up, and that's absolutely true. I don't know. That's a really good point. I think maybe I was just, I was a preseason All-American, and for whatever reason, coming into it, I just really struggled with it for the first time. And it was just adapting to this team, this new guy coming in and everything. And so what happened from there was, I remember we had our first player coach meeting, and this is like a performance review during the practice season. And Coach Lopez calls me in. I go to sit down, and before I could even sit down, he leans forward and he says, "Damon, when I recruited you to come to Pepperdine, it was because we believed that you had the talent and we're going to be a great member of this team. You'd hit in the middle of the lineup and you'd be a star for our team." And he's like, "Son, we made a mistake. You don't have the talent. You're not good enough to play Division I baseball." Annie, he sat back and he crossed his arms like this and just stared right into my eyes,
Wow.
And so
That's too real.
yeah. And so
So what did you feel at this moment?
I wasn't sure if I was going to cry or run out of the room, right? And all I could think about, I still remember this. I talk about it a little bit in my book, but I still remember this. It's like, I just wanted to go home, see my parents, get out of there, right? I couldn't believe he was saying this to me. And before I had a chance to respond, he leaned forward again and he said, "That is not what we think about you. We think that you have the talent to be a fantastic player here at Pepperdine. The problem is you don't believe in your head that you're good enough. You have too many limiting beliefs and self-doubts." And he's like, "Son, that's something we can't help you with. We're here to support you, but you need to get out of your comfort zone and play like we know you're capable of, or you're never going to be successful here." Now, I mean, what a reversal, right? I mean, he took me from, and then brought it back, thinking about how he thought I must be perceiving myself. And I'd like to tell you that I immediately left that office and turned it around, but unfortunately, I got hurt in an early season game, so I missed the rest of the year, and I ended up transferring out of Pepperdine, and I went to a junior college for a couple of years to play there. And I also got another chance to play for another Hall of Fame baseball coach. So you'll see the stories going as I've learned these lessons from all these people. Now, the interesting thing is, the year I left Pepperdine, guess what they did?
They won.
They won the College World Series for the first time and only time ever. And so that just goes to show you, all you leaders out there, and he set this crystal clear goal, and everything we did that year at Pepperdine was in motion, in direction to win the College World Series. We wouldn't even be allowed to wear other colleges' t-shirts around campus. We had to be focused on respecting ourselves and not looking at the University of Miami as like this big powerhouse, but more like that we could do it at Pepperdine. So anyways, I go to this junior college while they're winning the College World Series, and I get seen by a scout at Arizona State University. And Arizona State is one of the big powerhouses in the country. And I get offered a full ride scholarship to go to Arizona State. And so I was very excited about this. This was they were number 2 in the country at the time. And I was excited about this, but a lot of people came to me and said, "Hey, Damon, at this point in your career, why don't you just go to a smaller school, St. Mary's or San Francisco or someplace where you can play, get a good college degree, and just leave baseball behind? Because if you go to Arizona State, there's going to be 17 guys trying out for your position, and so you probably won't make it, sit on the bench." But I said to myself, screw it. This is my last chance in baseball. And this is what I spent my whole life thinking about. So I'm going to take this opportunity to go to Arizona State, which I did. And I outworked everybody. I worked really, really hard. I put the imposter syndrome and all that stuff behind me. And it was something that stuck with me my whole life. I had a tremendous career at Arizona State, and I learned from my work ethic, and I put together a 3-step framework of imposter syndrome I'm happy to go through.
Yeah.
But yeah, so I have this great year and I'm getting ready. We're in the College World Series. I hit a home run in the College World Series. And my wife likes to say that Glory Days story we heard. So that was 30 years ago, which is true. I hit a home run in the College World Series and I've done everything I could at this level. And I was really excited. The next day was the Major League Draft. And this was 1995. And this was pre-internet really, right? And so we're sitting in our hotel room in Omaha, Nebraska, and my roommate, Jacob Cruz, the phone rings at 10:30 in the morning, and it's the San Francisco Giants, the team I grew up, my favorite team. So Jacob was a first-round draft choice. And then 5 or 6, and then 10 other players get drafted, Annie. My call never comes. 12 guys on my team get drafted. My call never comes.
Oh, God.
And it was just like, my dreams of being a professional baseball player just kind of came to a crashing end, really right there, which is so, the day before I had a home run in the World Series. I'm all excited to finish up the rest of the tournament. And that was a big part of my story because, as I think I mentioned to you before, I put all my identity into becoming a baseball player. I overcome some challenges and I got to the point where I was ready. I always believed that if you succeed at one level, you always get an opportunity to go to the next level. But unfortunately, this didn't happen. So here I am at 22 years old, and I've never had a job before because I played baseball all over the world. I had I just spent all my time playing baseball and other sports. And I wasn't sure if anything that I learned from playing baseball, any of those skills were transferable into the business world. And so baseball came to an end. And then I had to figure out what to do from there.
Well, that's an interesting one. At 22, you had already a career, right? You had a career in sports. And then suddenly there is you just stop. You just hit a brick wall. And what do you do after that? At 22, how did you get out of this situation? What did you do?
So first of all, I was pretty depressed. I just, for a while there, I moved back home and I was actually got an apartment in San Francisco. I was very fortunate that I came from a family that had several really successful businesses, real estate, apartment buildings and hotels, and even a Chinese restaurant, all kinds of stuff. But at the time, my dad, like a lot of great entrepreneurs, he was trying to figure out how to digitize his portfolio for real estate, get it off the paper and put it on computers. He went and took a class at a computer training company. He grabbed one of my sisters. He went to it. He thought it was boring, sterile, long. And he's like, there's got to be a better way to do this. And that's where he came up with the idea of Learnit. And at the time, it was teaching the magic of computers. And so he called up our CFO. We had a savings and loan. He called the CFO and he's like, you're the only guy I know who knows how to use computers. I want to have quick classes that are 90 minutes long, that are inexpensive so anybody can go to them. I want magicians and comedians teaching them. He had all kinds of crazy ideas. And Learnit was opening 2 weeks after my baseball career ended. And I thought to myself, well, I'm kind of intimidated to go to the real estate route. And I know the guy running Learnit. So I took a job there as a receptionist at Learnit. And I took a job as a receptionist for 2 reasons. One, I didn't want to be seen as like, daddy's kid gets put up in a high position and, just doesn't have to earn anything. And 2, again, I didn't know if my skills were transferable, right? So I thought I'll just start at the ground floor, swallow my pride. And that's what I did. I started at Learnit as a receptionist, and I worked at the front desk for probably 2 or 3 years, and I answered thousands and thousands of phone calls.
Wow.
Literally.
So you started from the very, very bottom.
The very bottom, yeah. Going out to Office Depot to get pencils and all that kind of stuff back in the day.
Yeah, absolutely. Interesting. Unbelievable. You went on and, grew in the company. Right?
Yeah. So what I saw early on, even in the first couple of years, was, coming from a sports background, you saw a lot of discipline, you saw a lot of competitiveness and a lot of accountability. And I didn't really see that in the business world, and maybe it was just this guy running Learnit, but Annie, people were showing up late to work. We weren't getting deals done on time. We were losing deals. And I was just kind of frustrated, and I was like, this is my family's money. This is my family's investment. My dad never worked at Learnit. It was just a thing that he liked, he built. And so that's part of the reason why I work so hard, because I wanted to contribute and I wanted to make sure that whatever I did, I would always just go all in on, right? I wanted to show up and do the best I can do, whatever that was. I didn't want to just half-ass it, so to speak. And so and I was also pretty curious. I grew up in a time with DOS, so there was no Windows 3.1 or anything, right? And so
I remember these times.
Right? I mean, we're dating ourselves here. But it was pretty, and I studied baseball in college, but for the first time in my life, I got really curious and interested, and I learned how to use Microsoft Word, and I learned how to use ACT as our CRM. And so I started teaching classes. And I started teaching classes because I figured, well, this might save us some money. This is a challenge. So I went from sitting at the front desk to teaching classes to helping out on marketing to doing sales. And so, over the next 4 or 5 years, I did everything from cold calling to teaching classes to doing sales to helping out with IT. So similar to your story about you get to know every department inside an organization. Now, you did it at a massive level. I'm doing it at a 100-person, 75-person company. But I got to know every department so I could at least speak to what they were doing, right? And so about 5 years into it, the CEO wasn't working out. He just wasn't, it just wasn't into it. So the board which consisted of my dad, my grandfather, and 3 other people from our savings and loan and real estate company, they were looking for new CEOs. And I said, hey, let me throw my hat in the ring. I've answered more phone calls at the front desk than anybody else. I taught classes. I won the big Gap account. That was our flagship account, the Gap headquarters. We went up against IBM and other big competitors, and we won this big deal. And so I said, I would like the opportunity to lead Learnit. And my dad's like, okay, kid, you get it. You got it. And so that's when I took over, right, Annie, in the heart of the .com bubble in downtown San Francisco. Right. So here I am,
God.
26 years old. All my friends were paper millionaires. They all worked these .com companies. And I'm like, this is easy. Business is easy. Back then, all you needed was a fax machine to get all the signed contracts. And so at that point, I was telling my dad, I'm like, I want to expand. I want to open up a Learnit in San Jose, Los Angeles, New York, all these places. We're doing well, even more in San Francisco. And my dad was like, hey, look, we can do that, but expansion is hard. It's hard to recreate the culture in different areas. You kind of lose control. You got to make sure you have a strong advisory. He did all this stuff. I still talked him into it. So we went ahead and we opened up in Los Angeles, San Diego, a couple other places, and then Phoenix. And then the market crashed like that. And, 9/11, it happened before and after. And what a tremendous, tremendous learning lesson for me. And I'd have to say that for that time, if I didn't have the financial support from my family, I don't know if Learnit would have made it through that time. But my father believed in what Learnit was doing. And I think part of the thing that he really loved was the fact that we worked with all these great companies. We were working with Bank of America, Sephora, Gap, all of Barclays, all of these amazing companies that were sending hundreds and thousands of employees through training. And he's like, you got something great here. It's just, we made a big mistake, but we got to figure out how to weather the storm. And so, Annie, I'd have to call like every other Friday. And my grandfather, who was like the patriarch of our real estate, Frank Lembi, tough World War II vet, but he loved me. I was his oldest grandson. We go to breakfast twice a week, but I'd call him up and I'd say, hey, Gramps. And he'd say, let me put you on speakerphone. And it was him and my dad. He's like, what's up? And I'd say, can I borrow $10,000 to cover payroll this week? And then they just blow up at me. They blow up at me, but they'd always do it, And so my dad would like to joke after that, Annie, he said that you got the most expensive MBA, real world MBA that anybody's ever experienced.
Yeah, I can imagine. Yeah, absolutely. Well, I'm still thinking, where were I? I was at heading a department in Citi. Actually, we just opened Citibank in Bulgaria. And the business I joined was called Global Transaction Services or something like this. And then the name was changed into e-business.
Yeah.
And after the crash, we went back to the normal name.
Yeah.
But I remember that time. It was crazy.
Wasn't it crazy? Yeah.
It was crazy. Yeah, absolutely. But the 2008 crisis was even worse. I mean, the dot-com was bad, but 2008 was really, really bad, at least for banking. So you had so many lessons early in life. And how old were you when you went through the dot-com?
So that was 2000. I was 27.
Exactly. Unbelievable. Yeah. This was exactly like an MBA.
It was, yeah. I mean, I'd get up, but I got up every day. And honestly, I'd think about how much of my family's money I was spending, and I wanted to find a way to get it back, which I did eventually. But I had a great team. We believed in what we did, and we worked our way through it. I mean, starting in 2003, never had to borrow money ever since from family or anything like that, right? I mean, Learnit is a bootstrap company, and I started my way paying it back, and I did some other things to help. And you just mentioned the 2008, the Great Recession. I don't know if you want to fast forward to all the way there, but when that happened in 2008, first of all, our much larger business, the real estate and hotels and everything we had, we're the largest real estate company in San Francisco. We lost all of it, during this time, or the vast majority of it. So that was incredibly hard to see take place, especially for my dad and grandfather to go through that. But for Learnit, I took what I learned from 2001 and I made the adjustments much quicker. Like, we saw that this was happening. And so I went in, we met with our leadership team over about a week, and we went, and as tough as it was, we downsized by about 40%. We cut back on everything. I let everybody go personally, talked to our team. We took big pay cuts. And because I knew at this point, I had no support. I don't think any bank was going to loan us money at this time. And I didn't have my family to turn to. But we were able to weather that storm, which really helped us because a lot of our competitors went out of business. So, out of the ashes, we kind of came through it. But yeah, there was incredible learning, positive lessons that I learned from my family, and being able to, like I think I mentioned to you, I got to go to a lot of those meetings with all the different banks with my dad, and watching those negotiations and meeting with all the bankers, and just a crazy, crazy experience the whole time.
All right. So if you had to give an advice to somebody who is thinking to leave the corporate life and start a business, what would be the top 3 advice you would give? And you have such an experience, so many crises you've been through and survived and thrived. So I guess you're the right person to give this advice.
Well, so the advice I'd give to you, if you're looking at leaving a corporate job and starting your own thing, is first and foremost, I believe there's nothing like working for yourself. And I know that you're experiencing that right now with your career transition. All the accountability and responsibility at the end of the day lies on you. So that's just something, first and foremost, you have to keep in mind. You can't really pass the buck anywhere else. Number 2 is that it's a lot of work. You see a lot of entrepreneurs out there, and you see the successes they have and everything. And it's not a linear path. You're going to have bumps in the road, and you're going to have challenges. So, and this is sticking with number 2, you got to go out and you got to find either a career coach like Annie, or build yourself a network of mentors and people who've had a broad range of diverse experiences that you can turn to for ideas, right? If you don't have that already. And then number 3, when it comes to whatever it is you're starting, my recommendation is find something that you're passionate about. Now, it doesn't have to be, in my opinion, completely disruptive, right? It doesn't have to completely change the game in an industry. Maybe you just take something and you make it 10x better or slightly better. One of my favorite books of all time is Blue Ocean Strategy. And it talks about just that, where you take an industry and you find a way to do it a little better or different, which we kind of did at Learnit back in the day. You took these long full-day classes with somebody that looked like it was in a hospital, and you made it fun, exciting. So that's really my advice, is that understand the responsibility you're taking on. 2, making sure that you surround yourself with resources and people who can help you as mentors. And number 3, find something that you're passionate about and just, or whatever problem you're trying to solve, and try to find a unique value proposition. It doesn't have to be completely disruptive, but it helps solve the problem challenge in a different way.
Let's talk about learning and success. And one of the topics that you mentioned before was the difference between having a know-it-all mentality and learn-it-all mentality. Okay? Can you talk about this? How do you change from know-it-all to learn-it-all, and how do you keep to it for a long period of time, or forever, basically, throughout your life?
So know-it-all mentality and learn-it-all mentality is very similar to a fixed mindset and a growth mindset. And another great book for your listeners out there, if you haven't read Carol Dweck's Growth Mindset book, that's an amazing book. My book's pretty good too, Learn It All Leader. But you start off, so know-it-all mentality, these are the individuals, and you've probably had bosses like this, or leaders or friends, who they come to the game, they know everything. They have it all figured out. They're not open to ideas, right? It's my way or the highway. One of the worst things that I see people say out there is, this is how we've always done it. I mean, that's just...
I hate this one.
Isn't that the worst?
It.
Yeah.
Yeah.
If somebody's like, well, that's how we always done it, that's the perfect reason why not to do it that way. That's the know-it-all mentality. The learn-it-all mentality is you come in with an open mind, you're flexible and adaptable, right? And so you understand that you have the humility to understand that you don't have all the answers. And if you're leading a team, your team doesn't expect you to have all the answers, but as a leader, you need to know who to turn to for those answers, whether it's the mentors I just spoke about, or somebody else on your team who has a strength in something. That's what a Learn It All does, that they're open to different perspectives. They're able to pivot and change their mind and go in different directions. Now, as far as maintaining that type of mentality throughout your life, I think people go through different phases of fixed mindset and growth mindset, and know-it-all mentality and learn-it-all mentality, and in different aspects in their life. And so in order to maintain more of a learn-it-all mentality, I think you just need to be self-aware, and you need to be asking yourself in a specific situation, okay, am I being open to other ideas right now, or am I just being too firm on my opinion? And really, over the years at Learnit and the other endeavors I've done, I've gone back and forth. I mean, sometimes I'm really set in the stone on how something has to be done. And then hopefully, fortunately, I'll tell myself, okay, well, Damon, maybe take a step back and just be open to the idea. Don't just jump in with, when somebody's speaking to you, don't just jump into no as your first answer. Let them speak, right? Let them speak and say what they have to say, and settle in for a second and think about the possibility that they may be right. And if so, it's okay to switch, right, Annie?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, that's when you said it there, accept the possibility that somebody else can be right. But it is in today's time, not a lot of people do that. Everybody wants to be right. Everybody wants to be whatever they think is the most correct thing. That's what I see. We talk about the growth mentality a lot, but how do we implement it? And that's a completely different issue, right? And people struggle with this, and especially now when everything is changing, and if you don't learn, catching up is so difficult. It was not like before, right? Now catching up is so much more difficult simply because for a short period of time there's so many new things, and it will be very easy to fall off the wagon and really never get on again. Yeah. What do you think about this?
I had the great privilege on my show to interview Doug Conant, who is the CEO. He's in his 70s, CEO of Campbell's Soup. And he's one of the biggest learn-it-alls I've ever met. I mean, think about it. This gentleman has done everything, seen everything, and he continues to want to learn and grow. And what he told me is He said, Damon, if you either grow or you die in the business world, because things are moving so fast that if you're stuck in your ways and you don't allow yourself the ability to adapt, you're going to be so far left behind that you're not going to be able to catch up. And whether you as in your career, you're not going to be able to get another job because you're so far behind on your skills, or your organization is going to be shut down because you haven't adapted and grown. I mean, they say that human knowledge doubles every 12 hours, so things are changing.
Unbelievable, huh?
Right. And the complexity of the world and everything. And that's why, we do skills training, and people are always like, what are the most important skills? And one of the most important skills, I believe, is learning agility, is the ability to learn and also unlearn. That's just as important. You got to free up your mind, get rid of some of these old ideas and fill it with new stuff, and so the ability to continue to learn and evolve is, I think, critical if you're going to survive and thrive in the future.
Let's talk about imposter syndrome, because we mentioned it in the beginning, but can you take us to a moment where you had imposter syndrome so strong that you really failed, didn't manage to overtake it? And then after that, what did you do next?
Yeah. So I think a lot of times in imposter syndrome, it wasn't necessarily that I failed, Annie. It's just I failed to try. There are certain things that I would have, let's say, applied to be a keynote speaker at something, or just situations like that where I wasn't sure I was good enough. So I never even stepped up I never even got in the game. I never even gave myself a chance, more often than anything else. I mean, I think looking back on situations, that was the biggest one for me, is just not even trying, missed opportunities is a better way to say it. Right?
I see.
Examples of succeeding over imposter syndrome. One is like I spoke about in my baseball career. And two, another one is like a lot of people, I just, I was in doing public speaking. It's hard, I really, really struggle with it. And I got an opportunity to do a keynote at the Naval Academy, which is a huge honor. And I was scared to death. I was scared to death. And you know what? 10 years ago, Annie, I would have turned it down. I would have made an excuse not to do it, right? Because I would have been afraid that if it didn't go well, that it was embarrassing, But I didn't do that. I showed up and I worked really hard, and I'll go through my little framework, and I did the best I can do. And I think I did a very good job. Could I have done better? Yeah, but I'm super proud of myself for doing it,
Yeah,
so,
absolutely.
Yeah, so I think
what is your secret? What is your secret to overcoming imposter syndrome?
So
I want to have this secret.
Okay, so let's look at the Naval Academy situation, okay? So I get invited through somebody from my book. They came across my book and they said they're looking for a leadership speaker. They'd like you to come out and speak at the Naval Academy. And it was for these very high-level fire chiefs throughout the country, right? Like the top of the top. So tough audience. And so the first thing that comes to mind when it comes to imposter syndrome is I was afraid, right? I was afraid. So the first thing you do is you have to look at what you're afraid of. And so I look at, what am I afraid of? Okay, I'm afraid of failing, not doing a good job, letting the person down who is recommending me. Then I thought to myself, I use this term called purposeful awfulizing. Okay, so that's taking things to the worst case scenario. So what is the very worst thing that could happen? Well, the very worst thing that could happen is that I just am terrible and they walk out of the room in the middle of the thing, or they watch their phones. Okay, can I survive that? That person who recommended me might be upset. That's okay. I don't have to talk to him ever again, right? So yes, I can survive that, right? I mean, this isn't a life or death. You and I talked about this when you were on my show. This isn't a life or death situation. I can survive that. So I decided to do it. So here's my 3-step framework. Number 1 is work hard. There's no excuse there's no hack to get around work. You have to work hard if you want to get good at something. Number 2, and when I say work hard, I'm not saying work 10 to 12 hours a day all the time. But I'm saying it goes into number 2. It's deliberate practice. It's focus. So it's easy to procrastinate when there's something you're afraid of doing, and practicing, right? You can check Instagram, or you can take your kids for a walk, or you can respond to emails. But deliberate practice. And in this case, for me, it was, I really wanted to make sure I practiced the hook of my keynote, right? So I would really focus in on practicing that and getting feedback. And I hammered that one until I couldn't do it anymore. Then I went and I moved to something else. So just little deliberate practice and focus, over and over again, hard work, deliberate practice. And then number 3, when I walked into that auditorium, you got to stop. It's like walking into a batter's box in baseball. At that point, it's time to stop thinking about your technique. It's time to stop thinking about what you're worrying about or what you're going to say, and you just do it. So it's just let go and learn. So I just went up there and I told myself before I got started, hey, Damon, well, I visualized success. I said, I put in a lot of hard work. I put in a lot of practice. I deserve to be here. And I'm going to stop worrying about it. And I just did the very best I can do. And that's my thing. You work hard, you put into practice, you learn and let go. And then what happens? You either fall on your face, you crush it, or you fall somewhere in between.
Yeah.
Getting out of your comfort zone, Annie, that is where the learning happens, right? And for you listeners out there, hopefully this is resonating. What I want to say to you is, I don't think we give ourselves enough pat on the back for actually trying. There are so many people who are thinking about leaving their career right now, and they won't because they're afraid to make that change. You, if you're working with Annie or you're listening to this because you have just made that change, well, give yourself a pat on the back because you have the courage to do something different. And
exactly.
You're going to learn from that, and it's going to benefit you. And so that's really, I learned that that approach, I didn't know it at the time. When I first went to Arizona State, that baseball story, and I use that framework every time I come across something that imposter syndrome sets in. And for anybody out there who says that they don't have imposter syndrome or self-doubt, you're either lying or you're a sociopath, because we all go through it.
Have it. Yeah.
We all have it. We all go through it. And we just, if it's not going to kill you, like you told me on my show, you just have to go for it. And you'll be proud of yourself afterwards.
Exactly. No, people think that as you go and become more senior and more experienced, you don't have an imposter syndrome. You just do things and it's that easy. And it's not like this. Just like you, I go and speak at conferences and I'm afraid. My stomach is in the knot the day before, the morning before. And it's I start thinking I'm the least qualified. And I'm looking at my presentation and thinking, who on earth would be ever interested to listen to this gibberish?
I know, right?
That's the stage I go. It's every time I go through this stage. But I think that what comes with experience is that you go over this stage pretty quickly. You just say, okay, come on, just stop with this stupidity. Of course. Whatever you say is good. You've said these things before. So you just calm down and do this. And everybody, what's your technique? There is no technique. You just have to relax. I think that's the most important thing. At one point, 2 hours before the presentation, you just have to stop worrying about it. Do something. Do some meditation, watch something funny. Talk to somebody who is funny or relaxed. And
have a shot of tequila.
Get into it. Excuse me? Have a shot of tequila, yeah. But yeah, I completely agree with you. What is the difference between, there is always have to be a little bit of stress, a little bit of worry, because not the full procrastination, but a little bit of worry to keep you on your toes.
I was going to 1000%. I agree with that. And I'm glad you asked that, because I was going to say it anyways, that little anxious feeling in your stomach, that's good. If you don't have that, even before I come on a podcast with you, I still have that feeling, right? Because you're going into game time. And if you don't have that, you know what's going to happen? You're going to be on your heels and you're not going to alert. You're not going to have your A game, right? So
exactly.
That all goes back to, managing your emotions or recognizing your emotions, that if you're strolling into a meeting with your board or a keynote or going on a podcast or hosting a podcast, and you don't even have a little bit of anxiety going into it, then you should check yourself, because that probably means you're not prepared. You're not going to do well. So I'm with you 100%. It's a balance though, right? I mean, it's a balance. I like that feeling. And that's what gets me excited. That little anxiousness, right? Like I'm going into
exactly.
Every time I played in thousands of baseball games. Every time before the game started, I had that feeling. I always had that feeling coming into it. Now, if I get wrapped up in my head, like you were talking about, I think it's important to look back and say, okay, maybe I feel like this is gibberish. Who's going to want to listen to me? And think about the experience and all the good work that you have done and all the people you have helped and all the successes you have had, right? And that's the visualizing part of it. And that's what helps me too sometimes, right? Because, you go like, and then you also think like, well, there are people out there who could really benefit, in a humble way, can really benefit from what I have to say. So I owe it to them to put this nonsense aside, put this nonsense aside, this worrying aside, and go out there and deliver, right? And do the best I can do. And that goes back to like what we're talking about, fixed mindset or growth mindset. How do you, the growth mindset is really, it's not even about the results. It's about the effort you put into things, right? So if you go up on stage and you give it your best, no matter what happens, if you leave it all on the table and you give it your best, that's all you could ask for, and you got to be proud of that and learn from that and continue forward.
I want to go back to what you said just a second ago about imagining the worst scenario, the worst that can happen. I do the same. When I was leaving the corporate world, that was one of the things that helped me. What is the worst that can happen? Can I live with it? Okay, then I'm ready. But there is other opinion here that this is a negative approach to things, and it can paralyze you and is not helpful. What do you think about that?
Well, what I think is not helpful for anybody who says that is toxic positivity. The people who are too afraid to look at a negative possibility, and they, those people who just like they're always happy and positive all the time. I mean, nobody's happy and positive all the time. You got to be able to feel your emotions, and you can't be so naive to think that maybe things won't go exactly planned. And it's dangerous. It's dangerous because I think it's okay to take things to the negative. Now, again, people like you and I, Annie, we're not negative people, we're positive people. And sometimes I'm too positive, right? On taking chances and ideas and risks. But I think it's dangerous if you don't look at the worst case scenarios. Now, if it's a worst case scenario at like what you're ordering for dinner, who cares, right? But if it's leaving your job and the worst case scenario is that you never get your entrepreneurship off the ground and you can't make your mortgage payment in 2 months, well, then maybe that's not something you should do right now, right?
Yeah, exactly.
So you can't be blindsided and just think, okay, I'm so smart, I'm so great, I'm going to start my own coaching business and I'm going to immediately have clients in a month and I'm going to cover everything, right? So it doesn't work that way. But if you say, and I mentor and coach people on the side too, and I'll say to them, they're like, oh, I'm going to start my own thing, I'm going to do this, or I'm going to take this job. And I'll say, okay, well, worst case scenario, what's the worst possible case scenario? And then, oh, I never thought about that. Okay, well, you should think about that, right? And then, I'll say, if you have no income for 6 months, can you pay your bills? Yes. Okay, great. Then if that's the case, then you could survive this. But if you can't, you got to start looking for other directions. So I don't think it's good to be negative all the time at all. But I think you have to look when it's coming to a major risk decision, you got to look at what the worst case scenario is and really be honest with yourself about that. And if you can survive it, go for it then, right? If it's something you really want and you really believe in, especially when it comes to making a career change.
Great. One other question I want to ask you, and again about people who left the corporate world, started their own business, and how do they think about continuous learning? So imagine the situation, you are starting business, not a startup, you're not starting Uber or Amazon. You have just your coaching business, let's say, but you have to continue learning, because if you're coaching, let's say, for future of work or future skills, you have to constantly upgrade yourself. So what is that cadence and practice you have to put in place so you can continue learning and learning the right things that will help you?
I think that's a great question. And so I'd start off by saying everybody learns differently, right? Or everybody has a learning modality that they prefer. For me, I love reading books. And I also like having coaches, right? Those are for me. Some people like to watch documentaries. Some people like to read books. Some people like to go to classes. So you got to find what works for you, because I found that if you don't find something that works for you, then you're not going to want to stick to it anyways, right? So you're going to stop. And then I think you need to be intentional and consistent. And what I mean by that, when it comes to reading, I like to read 25 minutes every morning. And for a couple of reasons. One, because I don't think you can retain too much more information after that. And also, time's limited. And so I make a consistent effort every morning. I read for 25 minutes a book on a subject that is something that I want to get better at. Right now, I'm spending a lot of time reading AI books. And also, I'm always reading sales books or leadership books and biographies, mixing it all up. But so all of you out there, going through a career transition, you have to find ways and time to make sure that you're continuously learning. And if somebody says, well, I'm too busy, I don't have enough time, a nice trick is to say to them, well, what's your favorite Netflix show? And they'll rattle off 2 or 3 things that well, stop watching so much TV and get more disciplined and find time to learn.
Exactly.
Those are great ways right there. Other great ways are to just, again, either have mentors or be mentors. You can learn, Annie, something from everybody you come in contact with. And I think LinkedIn is such a great outlet where you can literally just reach out to people on LinkedIn and tell them you want to have a conversation and you want to learn more from them. And you'll be surprised at how many people actually say yes to that.
Yeah, exactly.
And so, when it comes to a learning mentality, I don't buy the excuse that you have too much, I'm starting my business, I don't have time to learn. BS. You do. Figure out what works best for you and be intentional and consistent with it.
Great. No, that was great. That the question about the Netflix movies, that's absolutely correct. And the other thing, scrolling, that is like, there's
Garbage.
statistic, garbage. Every day people lose 1 to 2 hours in scrolling. And 1 to 2 hours, can you imagine? That's a huge amount of time.
There's people who lose a lot more than, and you know what's worse than that? You're scrolling through garbage that makes you feel worse about yourself.
Exactly.
Because you're watching somebody with their fake stories up there about how great their families are or how much money they make. And you're thinking to yourself, so you're wasting your time and you're putting garbage into your head, so it just goes back to being intentional that's just being intentional. You can even set limits on Instagram and say no more than 20 minutes a day. Then after that, it shuts you off, so,
yeah.
But you have to have discipline. I think to be a great leader, to be a great entrepreneur, it all starts from within. You have to look inwards on, do you have the self-leadership and the self-discipline to be able to get yourself to the level that you really say you want to?
And now that you mentioned about what is it to be a great entrepreneur, what are the key skills you think that somebody has to possess in order to succeed in entrepreneurship? Because it's not that easy. People think, okay, I'm just going to live and that's it. I'm just going to... there will be success and I'll have the clients and this and that. And that's not true. Right? It takes time, etc. It's hard. You have to be intentional. It's so different than a corporate life. So what are these qualities and skills that people should focus on? And if they have this, they potentially can succeed.
I would say curiosity. I think you have to be really curious because as your entrepreneurship journey grows and goes on, you have to be really curious and interested in things around you. You have to have perseverance and resilience, right? Because it's not going to be easy, right? So you have to be able to dust yourself off and get back up and keep going. So I'd say perseverance, resilience, curiosity, courage. You're going to have the courage to make tough decisions. For instance, you might start off on a path with a certain product and you might realize early on, this isn't working out. I have to pivot. even though, you don't get stuck in the sunken cost fallacy, you might have invested in things, you might have to make a pivot in your direction. And I think those are the big ones. And I think you just have to have the humility to not be able, you can't go out it alone, right? You can't go out it alone. So you got to have the humility to be able to reach out to mentors or coaches or friends or family and just say, hey, can you help me with this? Can I run this idea by you? And then the last one, and this is very, very important, you have to be able to receive feedback. I'm not talking about giving feedback. You have to be able to receive feedback, because feedback is like rocket fuel for learning and for growth. And if you're somebody, and I've seen this, somebody who's come to me with their startup, and they ask me what I think, and I tell them the truth, they just totally get defensive or shut me off. Well, then why do you ask? You know what I mean? This is my perceptive, so I think being able to receive feedback as an entrepreneur is critical.
Great. No, that's a great one, because I've asked this question many people, and you're the first one who actually said that. And it really is really important. And it's not only in entrepreneurship, actually it's across the board, no matter where you are and what you do. If you can't accept and listen to feedback and be willing to see whether there is any truth in that, you're not going to succeed. That's true.
I was just curious, what is the number one skill that your other guests would say?
People say you have to know what you're doing, right? You have to have a strategy. You have to have the energy to do it. And the other things were what you said. I totally agree with energy. So if I have to have 3 top ones based on my limited 2 years experience in entrepreneurship, I would say, first, it takes a village. So take all the help. So forget about the ego, this, that, just take all the help. The second one is, now this is my favorite, be able to take feedback. And the third one is energy. Have the energy to do things, because a lot of energy is required for you to be a self-starter. Because when you start, there is no boss who tells you, oh, get and do that. You have to get the energy from somewhere and be active and do all these things. Because even to be curious, to want to learn, and all these other things you said, you need to have the energy to do it. Otherwise, you're just going to poof like a balloon.
I like that energy. And I guess I'd add to that energy discipline.
Discipline, absolutely.
And I thought about that, Annie, when you said that, because you're out there on your own, so you don't have a boss keeping you accountable, really. So, there's going to be times where your energy is at 60%. But if your energy is at 60%, you got to have the discipline to use up that 60% at the time.
Yeah, exactly. That's a very good point too. Okay, so let's end it on a bit more personal note. So you spoke about yourself, the story, your career, the baseball, etc. But what is one thing we don't know about you?
One thing that you probably wouldn't know about me, and I think my friends tease me about this a lot, is that I love Broadway musicals.
Oh,
Lion King, Jesus Christ Superstar, Rent, all those Broadway musicals. So I go to them by myself. I go to them with my kids. But a lot of my buddies just don't understand it. So that's one thing that most people don't know about me.
What was the best day of your life?
The best day of my life was the 2 days that my kids were born.
Okay.
Really, we didn't have kids until I was in my 40s, and I didn't know it would ever happen. And when I first got to hold my little girl in the room, I was like, nothing I've ever seen before.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I had my kids late too. So I know how you feel from a women's perspective, but still.
Yeah, no, it was just like, but yeah, no, that was unbelievable. Maybe I should say my wedding day, but yeah, gotta go with the kids.
Yeah, I gotta go with the kids. Yes, absolutely. But what about the worst day?
When my dad died.
Oh,
it was he had cancer, and it was a 6-month battle and everything. And so I don't know if that day was actually when I knew there was no turning it around, really. It was just an afterthought. That was when I knew that this was coming to an end, was the day. Yeah. hands down, no other thing, anything even close.
Okay, so I don't want to close it on such a negative note. Not a negative note. It's not negative.
It's not a negative note. That's how life goes.
That's absolutely life. Is like this. So tell me, what are your aspirations? What is next for you?
What is next for me is Learnit's heading into which is crazy, it's heading into our third decade. And
third decade. Wow.
Third decade, which I know is very probably unique these days. People bounce around so much. And I love it because I feel like we treat it like a startup. We're always trying new things and doing things differently. So that's what keeps it fresh and interesting. And so what I'm excited about is a lot of we're a live learning platform. We teach skills and how to be better managers and stuff like that. But we're leveraging a lot of AI tools to help supplement what we're doing, right? So we're not shifting to just AI learning or anything like that. We're adding a lot of tools that can help our customers with retention. And we built some of our own technology, some of our own IP, which has been amazing. So that's what's really exciting. And beginning of the year was a little tough, but this last quarter is looking good. And I'm hoping that we continue to keep the momentum going. So that's it on a professional front. And on a personal front, it's just, got 2 kids and a great wife, and just I want to be the kind of parents that my parents were for me, so that I can give the kids leave with them the same type of legacy that my parents gave to us. So I got a busy plate, but I wouldn't change it for anything. Oh, and I love the podcasting stuff. I got the Learn It All podcast, and I meet all these incredible people like you and a guy, Doug, Conant, Omar, who connected us. So that's been super fun and exciting. And for somebody who likes to learn like me and you, it's like I get these hour-long conversations with individuals, and I just learn so much from them.
Absolutely agree. Oh, that was a great upbeat ending. Thank you so much. I really enjoyed our conversation.
I did as well.
And I wish you all the best. And we are going to do great things. I know.
I'm with you on that. Thank you for having me. I really enjoyed our conversation. As usual.
Please hit subscribe to the show and leave a review or comment about how you find this episode.